a production of South Carolina ETV.
Voting is important because if you don't vote, you don't get like a president, a governor, or a vice president, or a Senate member, or a House of Representative member.
If we didn't vote, we'd be stuck with the same person forever, and if you didn't like him or whatever, you wouldn't be able to change him.
We elect our officers in November.
We should vote to elect our officers and the people that are going to represent us.
Voting is important because it shares the democracy that this country has. Without voting, well, it wouldn't make up a democracy.
Every 4 years, South Carolinians go to the polls to elect a new governor, lieutenant governor, and other constitutional officers. These are the people we'll trust to make the right decisions for our state. Voting is spoken of as a right and a privilege, and yet few people actually exercise that right.
Well, you don't have to worry about me. I've just turned 18, and I'm ready to vote.
Hey, that's great, but there's a lot more to it. Are you registered to vote?
Registered? What do you mean?
Well, in order to be able to vote in South Carolina, you have to be registered. And in order to be registered, you have to be qualified. You have to be a citizen of the United States and South Carolina. And you have to live in the county and precinct that you will be voting in. And you have to be at least 18. You cannot be in jail due to conviction of a crime, and you cannot be registered if you have been declared mentally incompetent. It doesn't matter how long you live in South Carolina, but you have to register at least 30 days prior to an election in order to vote in that election.
Okay, I'm qualified. Now what? Where do I go?
You know, before you were born, your parents probably had to go to the county courthouse in order to register to vote. But things have changed. Today, if you're 18, or you will be by the next election, you can register to vote at a lot of different places. You can go in person to your county voter registration office, or the public library has forms, or you might be able to register at a mall or other local community event where they are holding a legally organized voter registration drive. You can also register by mail, and your school may have forms. You simply need to fill them out and return them.
So how long will this registration be good for? Do I have to get it renewed?
As long as you vote at least once every 2 years, your name will stay on the active voter list in your precinct. If you are sent to jail for a felony or for an offense against the election laws, you will not be able to vote. You can register once you have served your entire sentence, including probation and parole, or have been legally pardoned. If a woman gets married and changes her name, she will have to make that change with the county voter registration office. Also, if you move to another county or precinct, you will have to re-register in order to be able to vote.
Wait a minute. Why do I have to go to all that trouble? Why can't I just show up and cast my ballot?
Well, basically, it's to keep you from voting twice in an election. For convenience sake, the state is divided up into 1,929 different precincts. In most cases, no one should have to go more than 5 miles in order to cast a vote. In highly populated areas, there are lots of polling places, and your registration number is your identification to that place. Each precinct is given a list of the voters who are registered in that precinct. When you go to vote, you show your voter registration card or some other identification like your driver's license, and your name is checked off the list. You have to be registered 30 days prior to an election in order to be able to vote. This is so accurate voter registration lists can be prepared and sent to each precinct. Not too long ago, the voter registration lists were also used as lists of people who could be called to serve on juries, and many people didn't register to vote to keep from being called for jury duty. That changed, and now juries are picked from a combination of list of registered voters and the rolls of people who have driver's licenses.
Okay, I'm ready. Now when can I vote?
Well, it depends. Traditionally, Election Day is the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. This is specified in the South Carolina Constitution. Most offices are filled on that day, even county offices. But there are lots of other local elections, like those held for city officials, school board members, and local referendums that can be held any month. It depends on the month or date specified in the city charter or school board legislation or whatever governing document is used. A referendum is what we have when we refer an issue to the people. In other words, we get to vote on an issue. It might have to do with only local matters, or it could be about changing the Constitution or raising sales tax. A referendum can be binding, meaning that it is the final decision on an issue, or non-binding, which means it simply suggests to our lawmakers.
Wait a minute. Why don't they just vote for everything at the same time? Wouldn't that save money?
Maybe, but the more information that is on a ballot, the more chance there is to get people confused. If the issues are really confusing anyway, a lot of people just won't go to the trouble to vote. The more stuff there is to vote for, the longer it takes for each person to cast a vote. If you can vote for several things at once, it does save some money. The fewer the elections, the lower the expenses to the taxpayer. On the other hand, the more things that are on the ballot, the more confused people can get.
Well, now that I've registered to vote, does that mean I have to decide whether I'm a Republican or a Democrat?
Not in South Carolina. South Carolina is one of the few states with nonpartisan voter registration. Being partisan means you support a particular political party. Many states require that you register as a Democrat, a Republican, or an independent. If you register as an independent, you don't claim membership in any political party. Political parties provide us with qualified candidates and campaign for their election. Parties often provide us with opposing viewpoints on major issues. Both Democrats and Republicans participate in a type of election called a primary. Primaries are held before a general election. You know, just like elementary school is sometimes called primary school, it's something that comes before. As the two largest parties in South Carolina, both the Democrat and Republican parties hold their own primaries to choose who will be their candidates. In a primary election, the winner is the one who gets the majority of the votes cast. Primaries with two or more candidates frequently have to have a runoff before one person emerges as the winner. But in a general election, the winner only has to have plurality. That means the person with the most votes wins, even if it's only by one vote.
You mean if someone runs for state office and they lose by one vote, that's it?
Well, not necessarily. If a candidate loses by less than 1% of the vote, he or she can demand that they be counted again. Once that recount is over, if the winner is still ahead, even by one vote, that's a plurality and he or she wins.
Okay, I'm qualified, I'm registered, and I know when the election is. Where do I go?
That's a good question. If you are voting in a primary, the county decides where voting will happen. Rules about how voting places must be set up and what happens during voting are established by the legislature and the South Carolina Election Commission. The place where you cast your vote is referred to as a polling place. That comes from the word poll, which stands for count. For primaries, general and special elections, the South Carolina Election Commission and each county's election commission is in charge. Individual counties pick their polling places, which are usually public buildings. The State Election Commission and the County Election Commission hires, trains, and certifies the people who serve as poll managers. Each county has a voter registration office that is located at the county seat and is open during normal courthouse hours. If you have questions about where you are supposed to vote, you can call the County Voter Registration Office. Usually polling places and their locations are published in local newspapers on the day before or the day of an election. If a candidate or political group wants to have observers present during the voting, they have to provide their own person. This person is called a poll watcher. The poll watchers cannot actively campaign for their candidate in the voting place during an election. They are only there to observe. If a poll watcher thinks that a voter is not properly qualified, they may challenge that ballot.
Oh, hey, does anyone know who I voted for?
No, how you vote is entirely up to you. In South Carolina and throughout the United States, we take great pride in casting a secret ballot. In fact, inside the polling place, the place where you actually cast your vote is curtained off or located so that the privacy of your vote is assured. In South Carolina, there is no one method of voting. Each individual county determines how the people who live in that county will vote. There are vote recorders and optic scanners. Some counties have lever voting machines, and some use electronic voting. Even today, in our modern computer-driven society, there are some counties that still use paper ballots, and in many local elections, the paper ballot is what is used. Polling places are usually open from 7 a.m. until 7 p.m. If you are already in line at 7 p.m., you may still vote, but you may not vote if you get there after 7. After the polls are closed, the ballot boxes are sealed and taken to a place designated by the County Election Commission where all of the votes are counted. Then the results are sent to the State Election Commission. If you are blind, illiterate, or are physically handicapped, you may have assistance in marking your ballot, but otherwise no one goes into the voting booth with you.
What if I'm not going to be in town during the election? Can I still vote?
No problem if you plan ahead. There's something called an absentee ballot. You can either call your county voter registration office or go there in person, or send a request in writing to explain why you will not be able to vote in person and to request an absentee ballot. You'll have to give them your voter registration number or some way to identify yourself as a registered voter. The County Voter Registration Office must receive your completed absentee ballot application by 5 p.m. 4 days before the election you want to vote in. If you go in person, you may vote right there. If you request a ballot by mail, they send one to you. Fill it out and return it, and it will be counted with all the other votes that are cast in person. They must be received no later than the closing of the polls on Election Day in order to be counted. Absentee ballots are counted last, but they are just as important.
Okay, I've got just one last question. Why should I vote? I'm just one person. Does one vote really count?
Yes, remember that word plurality, the most votes wins? One more than anything is the most. But you have a few more things to think about. As a citizen, your vote is your voice. Politicians do pay attention to what their constituents want. They represent the people who voted to put them in office. But even if the person you voted for loses, the simple fact that you voted gives you the right to hold those elected responsible. It's okay to complain. Good office holders want to represent all of the people they serve, and they need to hear your viewpoints. They can't represent you if they don't know how you feel. If you have an opinion on an issue, write or call your office holders. It's called participation. When you decide to vote, when you read about the issues, when you listen to the speeches, when you pay attention to what the candidates have to say about their opinions and how they would vote on issues, you are taking a big step in democracy. When you choose not to vote, you are leaving your future, your choices, your taxes up to other people. In South Carolina, too many people choose not to vote. Nationwide, the percentage of young people 18 to 25 is the lowest in voter participation of all groups. You can change this. When you're old enough to vote, just do it. Voting is not only a right and a privilege. If you care, it's your duty.